My name is Mark Gamlin. I'm Head of Sales and Marketing here at ITRM. It's really nice to see a lot of names that I recognise joining us today, along with many that are new. For those of you that are not so familiar with ITRM, I'll give you a very brief introduction. We're a leading provider of managed IT services, and our aim is pretty simple really, to be your technology partner of choice, along with helping you solve all of your business challenges and to ensure you maximise your return on investment with technology. For over 20 years now, we've continually built and developed relationships with our clients. Our vision and values are at the core of everything we do, and we honestly feel this sets us apart from our competition. Just to let you know that today's presentation is being recorded. We'll send out a link to the recording to all of those who have attended today. In today's webinar, we'll start by taking you through the basics. This section will include an introduction to Teams and channels. We'll cover chat, video, desktop sharing, along with how to share securely with third parties. Then we'll move on to the more advanced elements. This section will cover Power BI dashboards, SharePoint, third-party apps and Power App. Following this, we'll have a look at Skykick backup and restore, sharing, guest access admin, auditing, and the final part of this section will cover tags and alerting. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and we'll show you the details on how to use the Q&A in a slide in a few seconds. Today's presenters are Mike Castle, who is our Chief Technology Officer at ITRM, and Matthew Porter, who is our Pre-Sales Architect. So once again, thanks for joining us today. I'm sure you'll find the presentation informative and thought-provoking. I will now hand you over to Mike Castle.
Thanks very much, Mark. Afternoon, everyone. I'm sure in this time that Teams is probably becoming a bit more relevant to a lot of people. So hopefully today will give you a bit of an eye-opener to some of the other things that it can do, other than the basics that you might be using today. So what I'm going to do is just, cover off first off Q&A. So to help keep the flow of the webinar, we're going to use the Q&A built into the event. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see an option to ask a question. Just throughout the event, just literally fire your questions in. When we get to the Q&A section, we will start to go through them. And from that, we will answer as many as we can. Anything that we don't get to answer today due to time, we will be publishing answers to all of the questions asked and making that available to all attendees. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just cover off really what Teams is. A lot of people see it as just a very quick tool to collaborate as a team. There's quite a lot more to it. It is a communication and collaboration tool. It does use Microsoft tools within it, the likes of Word Online, Excel Online, etc. But it's also got functions from Skype, if you remember. So things like online meetings, video calls and desktop sharing. But it can also do much more. And that's some of the things we're going to show you later today, particularly around some of the third-party app integration and the ability to share information securely. So really just to cover off really where we're at, I'm going to cover some basics. But when you talk about Teams at the moment, I'm sure it's things like sharing files, the odd chat, the odd online meeting. So there's more to it, and we're going to go into some live demonstration to show you. So without further ado, I will switch into Teams. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a couple of teams on the left-hand side. So I've got a demo team and a private share example. So they're your teams. Within Teams, there are channels. And those channels are basically used to focus conversation, I guess, and focus teamwork. So this is where you might divide it by team, by virtual team, or potentially the whole organisation. You have the option to do all. Now, channels are normally taken the security model from the team itself, but you can filter it. So you can have a private team of a few team members rather than the whole team. And I'll show you that later on. But essentially, channels are there to silo the information, to keep it focused and drive it forwards. Looking through, you can see the standard functions within it are normally posts, files and wiki. I'm not going to go too much into wiki at the moment, but I will show you some elements of post and files. And the first thing I'm going to do is just drop into general. So you can see you get a feed basically of activity that's gone on. And I'm going to talk about some of those in detail in a second. but just to give you a few of the things that you can do that people may not be aware of. So down the bottom, you have a number of icons, and as you can see here, we have one called Format, and here I have the ability to create a message. Some people type straight into that message box at the bottom, and you can do that and then just hit the send button. But if you actually hit the format, you have the ability to change it from a conversation to an announcement. This might be something where you can then launch something to the business or to the team. So if I just quickly show you what that looks like, I can also stop people replying to it. But here is something we can show. So there we go. You can add things like graphics in, etc. For this example, I'm just going to click post, and there we go. So you can make it very personalized. You can put logos behind it, etc. You can do quite a lot, but it's just a different way of actually getting some of the conversation out there. What we've seen is that a lot of conversations started to move away from email into chat in posts, and this is more about the team sharing information, collaborating together. You can go to chat up on the left-hand side up here and have individual chats one-to-one. But for today, we're just going to focus on the team element, okay? So other things down the bottom that we can use, which I'll show you. If you are aware of things like kudos, you might see where you can thank one of your teammates. And so here I'm going to send praise to one of my colleagues. And so there we go, I'll pick an icon and I'm going to send this to Matt. There we go. Very quick. Thanks for everything, Matt. There we go. I'm going to preview that. Looks good. And I'm going to send that. And again, that appears in the post list. So you can see quite easily. It's a good way of recognising your teammates when they're doing a good job. And particularly now with all of this isolation, meaning we're all working remotely, it's a good way of keeping the team spirit up. So also within here, so if you were talking to a colleague and you're looking for an organisation, as an example, we can go here. So if I type in, just find ITRM. Well, if I set it up, that'd be good. There we go. So here I can select it and I can post into the chat a location. And from here, others in the team go to the website or get directions to it. So there we go. That's us. Other things that we can add in that can also be beneficial are things like YouTube. Whilst it's also a great source of entertainment, it's also actually quite a knowledge source. So as an example, I could search for sales training. And in that, I can pick a video and I can paste it to my team. Prime example. At that point, everyone can just click the link, in they go, and they can watch what you want them to see. And it's a good way of sharing information on a specific subject. Could be your own videos if you've got your own YouTube channel. So really, that's the basics of the post side of things. I'm just going to show you elements of files, and within files it's very straightforward really. So I'm going to use my sales team channel and I'm going to go to files here. So here I've got a couple of files already, and one of the new functions that has been brought in is the ability to pin files up here. You can actually add files up into this line at the top, not necessary all the time, but it is a good way of highlighting a file that's relevant to individuals. Similarly, add cloud storage. So in this allows you, prime example, if you merge with another company and they happen to be a Google platform user, they may have a Google Drive share full of information. And before you get through the process of actually integrating your systems and joining your organizations together, you do have the ability to add in things like Google Drive to actually access that data directly, which means you can work collaboratively across different platforms without all of the pain of trying to gain access with extra accounts. So that's really files at the moment. Files can be straightforward, creating new ones, new folders, etc. And then you have the ability, as we know, to open them either in the online version app, or you can actually open them in a local desktop application. Just going on to meetings really, so in calendar, I'm just going to show you. As you know, we're actually in a Microsoft Teams event at the moment. To create this event, you would go here, as you can see there, just highlighting it there. That would allow you to create an event, and just to give you some statistics, meetings, so that scheduled meeting can have up to 250 attendees. That's looking to rise currently to 1,000 in the coming months. Microsoft is just working on that at the moment. And if you were to run an event like this one, you can actually have 20,000 attendees to one event. You can run 50 events concurrently in any one tenant, and any one event can last for up to 16 hours in one go. Just some stats for you. And that's really that. So at the end of this point, I think I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to now take you through some other elements, starting with SharePoint. Over to you, Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing okay in this strange time. What I'm going to do is just share my screen with you. You should all now be able to just see coming through. And with that, I'm just going to take you through those slightly more advanced features that Mike touched on regarding file sharing and file access within SharePoint, all built into Microsoft Teams. So if I pull up the general team, this team Mike's been showing you a few things in, and I pull up files, what we can see is we can organize data in traditional structures, the way everyone, I've been using for years, I'm sure everybody's been using for years. Make folders, drop documents into them, and sort things out. What you can then do is, as Mike showed, just quickly make a new Word document and open that up. I'm just going to show you that experience. So give it a name, hit create, it opens up the document and opens up for you in the Teams browser directly. You can then add in some text, very basic functionality, and do most of the formatting tasks all within the Teams interface. Unfortunately, within the Teams interface, there are a few the more advanced functions, particularly in Excel. If you do want to access those, it's really straightforward. All you do is click Open in Desktop App. Little Windows pops up to tell you that that's happening, and it opens up for you directly in Word. With this, apologies, with this types of this data, what you do have is there's no need to save anymore. There's no old-fashioned hitting the save button. I'm sure everyone, including myself, we've all forgotten to do it at some point in our lives. With this auto-save feature, every time I make a change, it's just automatically added in and saved into the document. If I just close that document, drop back into Teams, what we're going to demonstrate now is the fact that there's no one person in a document at one time. If you've ever had one of those situations where 4 or 5 people are all trying to write a document together, and you end up with lots and lots of different versions of it all over the place, I don't know if you share my experience, you end up with email versions dropping around and things like version 26C with Matt's comments and with Mike's additions dropped into that. And then some poor person has got to try and figure out what's the best version to put in before you actually bring it together. With Teams, what you can do is I can be in this document editing away. As you can see, there's a little blue cursor here. And with that, that's Mike, who's also within this document, dropping text in and actually making changes. So both of us can work really collaboratively. Mike typing badly, everyone makes typos on these demos. Working collaboratively in 2 different places, all just over the internet, without having to really worry about different versions of documents. And there's one more feature that I'll just show you within the SharePoint functionality before I hand you back to Mike for some additional bits of information. And that's the versioning that's built into the system. With that autosave functionality, you might think it's a bit difficult if you add another paragraph, you can't save different copies as you might want to do. So instead, if I just open up this document for you, this is a very basic document. I just wrote 3 different lines of text in 3 different sittings. And if you go to File and Info within Teams, go to Version History, what you can see is I can actually see through all the different versions of this file that I made. And with this Show Changes icon that's highlighted here, I can actually see that it highlights the text that I added in that particular editing session. So if I click back to the version I made yesterday, and as you can see, it takes out that third draft, and just highlights that that second loan was made at that point. And I can just flip back between them, and I can save copies if I need to edit different versions of it at different points. Thank you for that. What I'm going to do is hand back to Mike now, and he'll take you through some ways that you can take basic Excel documents and show them in different representations.
Thanks, Matt. Right, bear with me, just flipping back to my my desktop. There we go. Everyone see that? Good. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do is just show you how other tools plugging into Teams can give you the ability to stay in Teams and work collaboratively, but actually get, you know, versions and snapshots of information that you might not see otherwise. It saves you dropping in and out of other applications. So here's a prime example. So I'm going to do a bit with Power BI. So here we have a spreadsheet, and what this could be as an example is this could be your sales admin putting in the sales figures for each of your current team members. Looks great, very boring. It's just a spreadsheet. But essentially what that could also be shown as, if you plug in Power BI, you can actually get it to translate and actually show it in a different way. So if I now go to sales team here, I have a dashboard created. And all this is a representation that's live against that spreadsheet. And it allows me to then analyze the data graphically. So I can still roll over it, it will still give me information. So there you can see where that peak comes from. Georgia was a lucky girl and she had a good sales month in March, looking at that. And basically what it does is it allows you to see snapshots of information. It can be used across multiple data sources, things like SQL servers, you know, databases that you may have elsewhere, as well as text files, CSV files, Excel spreadsheets, take your pick. There's a lot to it. And if I just show you behind the scenes, it's very straightforward. Here is Power BI. All you would be doing literally is creating something and then linking it to a source. So there we go. And in here, this is where you start to add in information. So it's very straightforward. And all you then do is you publish the dashboard, and that would then allow you to add that into your team, which is what I've done here. Okay. It's very straightforward, and I'll show you some other uses of Power BI in a second. But the other part of this is with integration. It's not just about the dashboard. Sometimes it's actually about just keeping a view of things that are going on elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is just show you an example of a development team. So here we have Jira, which is a tool used to manage the tasks in the development team. And I've actually linked Jira to it, so I can now look at the tasks in detail if I really wanted to. So if I assume a role of a development manager for the moment, and it logs me in, there we go. I can now see a list of all the tasks for the team, and I can open up that task and I can see exactly what's going on inside it, see what it is, if there was a description, who it's assigned to, etc. But in reality, some development managers don't need to see the task line detail. That's for the development leads within each of the teams. So at that point, again, Power BI can come into its own. And what I've now done is link Power BI to Jira and then publish the Power BI dashboard back into Teams. So if I now look at a bug-only review, this is a live dashboard from Power BI looking at my Jira projects, and I can now see the priorities and I can manage it in a very graphical way, and I can see how big the backlog of tasks are. So from a development perspective, that would be how much work have the team got left to do, which means obviously I can keep an eye on things, and I don't need to get into the task line detail. So it does keep me very focused. I don't need to leave Teams. If you look on the left, I can still see if I get chat or activity coming in, I can still drop into my calendar, but I can keep an eye on this and it's live because it's actually refreshing against the data on a very regular basis. And no different from a sales perspective. If I were to use Salesforce as my CRM, there we go. And if I go to opportunities, I've got a load of opportunities here. And what I can do is link that so that any task activity update, so maybe it's I need to call somebody, I need to do something, I need to escalate something, appears here. And basically what it would allow my whole team to see is what's going on in Salesforce without having to keep jumping in and out of Salesforce. But what it would also do is I could hit the button and go straight to that activity in Salesforce. So it keeps me focused, and that's the point that we're trying to get across. You know, Teams is a very good application in its own right, but actually it's also an aggregator of other applications. It keeps you focused, and it is a hub of all the things that you need to do. All right, so I'm going to finish that off now, I think, and what I'll do is I'll pass over to Matt, who's now going to take you through Power Apps. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just bring my screen live. So Power Apps are, just as Mike was saying about having different ways of representing data in Power BI, Power Apps give you the same ability, but also the ability to manipulate that data and really give it a very mobile focused view. So with my screen up, what you can see is I've got here a very, very basic spreadsheet, which has some details of different types of flooring that a salesperson might require. Although all the information's here, you've got the names of the type of flooring, the category, the price, and the overview. It's not really the most interactive mechanism. It's quite a difficult way to read it at speed. So if I just open up, what I've done is I've built a quick Power App that will show you that same information, but in a mobile focused and very interactive friendly view. So that Power App's just loading for us now. And this is the mobile view, so it's nice and shrunk. But as you can see, although it's exactly the same information, it gives it to you in a much clearer view. You can search for things, you can sort by different types, so I could just change the order of these items. And I can also click and plus and add in a new one. I could add in the details that I want to, and all that would do is go through and update that spreadsheet in the background. That's the end of our section on really kind of representing different types of data within Teams. And what we're going to start talking about now is some more of the security and governance pieces, because I'm sure some of the, although you've realized the power and the ability to integrate and aggregate lots of different third-party applications and other things into Teams, that could also become a data governance issue and a security issue. But really, the first thing we'll take you through is backup. Really important that if information is deleted, you can get back to it, not just tomorrow, if files you created then, but also in 6 months, a year's time, even longer. So you've really got long-term retention of data. If I just open up this demo team that we've been talking through, go to useful documents. As you can see, I've got a file here, critical data, do not delete. What I'm going to do is just go through and delete it. Message pops up. Are you sure you want to send the items to the recycle bin? Hit yes, and that's gone from the team. Now, to recover it, there are lots of different things and lots of steps that we could go through. First one is if I hit open in SharePoint, what this actually shows me is exactly the data we've been looking at in SharePoint. It's not that this is a synchronization or anything, it's actually a view into the same data, which is a different way of representing. And I can go to the recycle bin. And there I can see critical data, do not delete. You can see why the time I tested it just to make sure it was working as well. So what I can do is I could just tick that document and restore, and it would drop it straight back in for me, as I've just done. However, if it was deleted from this, what we could do is there's the further recycle bin. It's called the deleted item retention. If something's removed from the recycle bin, it sits in that deleted item retention for up to 30 days, and then it's deleted permanently. Now, for some organisations, that's fine. It gives you that ability to restore information quickly. But for others, particularly something with a very strong governance around it, maybe some health data, that might not be enough. So what you can do is integrate a third-party backup product onto any system, which would take snapshots of the data 6 times a day and put them into an entirely separate system. In the event that that data was deleted from the recycle bin and had expired on its 30-day retention, you would still be able to go into that third-party product and restore the data back into the environment. And all it would do is just drop it back with all of your changes, all of the versions that we talked about previously included. We also have a number of other controls with Teams, a number of things that we can do really to make sure as an admin that the data's secure, that everything that we're dealing with is okay. If I just open up the specific team that we've been working with, and that's this demo team here. And as an admin, I've just logged in as my admin session. I can see who's got access to it, I can see their roles, and I can see their permissions. And I could go and add someone, I could remove someone's access dynamically over the top, as well as the owner's control. I can also go into channels, I could do the same thing on the channels, and I can also control what users can do within that actual team. So if I wanted to say as an admin, actually we don't want messages on that team, I can just go in and disable them. This can be handy for just streamlining conversation to stop things being having too many options about where to talk, but also just controlling data within the platform. One other thing that also comes up quite a lot for us with our customers is that people want to know that they can audit Teams chats. That could be for an HR reason, maybe there's a really unfortunate staff bullying case, or it could be for a compliance reason or a legal case. You want to know everything that's happened on a particular topic. So what you can do is on either an individual team basis or on globally within the platform, you can turn off the ability to edit or delete messages. Effectively, when a message is sent, that would then be locked and the user would be unable to change it. But it does mean that we can then audit the entire platform from the back end for any references to particular searches, maybe a particular name related to that thing that you're interested in. It makes it really powerful to audit the entire environment. And you can actually audit multiple things with those search terms at the same time. So you could audit email, SharePoint, and chat messages all in one go. And Mike's going to take us through a demonstration of that later. We also get a number of different controls that we can put onto meeting policies, things that can control, lock down the environment to make sure that we don't allow data to leak out and other exposed risks into the environment. So, for example, when you send out a conversation, a meeting request to an external organisation, by default, they could see you can share your screen with them, but they can't get in and control it. That's something you could turn on, but you could also prevent people from certain users from being able to share their screens. They're dealing with particular sensitive information and other very, very kind of granular level controls. And the final series of settings that I'll take you through is the apps. You saw when Mike was talking about this huge, vast catalogue. In fact, there's 513 different apps that plug into Teams. And that's great. It makes it really flexible and makes it able to fit the environment that you're working in and really provide for the needs of your users. However, that could also lead to people adopting apps, bringing apps into the environment before they've really been tested, before you know how they're going to work with people, and data disappearing off into different silos without really any overall oversight. So what you could do is you could select the apps and we could just block all of them and then just enable the ones that you're working on as an organization. Or there could be specific apps that you really don't want to allow. So if I just pick one randomly, collaborate space, I'm afraid I don't actually know what this one does. I could select it and I could block that app and I say, no, as an organization, we really don't want to use that and we're just going to lock it out from the environment. What I'll do now is I'll just hand over to Mike and he'll take us through some of the auditing and other security functions that are available within Teams.
Thanks, Matt. Right, bear with me as I just switch desktops again. Right, okay. So from an administrative perspective, obviously it's an interesting time where we're moving more and more data into these cloud services. And that's where we now need to start controlling exactly who can see it and actually making sure we've got, confidence in who's accessing our data. So what I'm going to do is just take you through some of the compliance elements around alerting. And the reason for alerting can be a number of things. You might want to watch someone's activity. You might want to watch specific files. Example would be maybe your HR data, your salary spreadsheet, could be anything. So going into compliance side of things, you can alert on activity, and every IT administrator has probably got enough access to the entire data set, and they're going to need that to be able to run backups or to manage security rights for you. But in reality, you may not want them looking at sensitive data. So this is where some of these alerts can tell you that actually, if somebody looks at a certain file, it's going to tell you who they are. So if we look at the alerts in particular, I've already configured an alert for my demonstration here, and all I've got is that any activity on any file by my demo user creates an alert. So you can see there's a number of messages coming up here. And if I hit that one, you can now see it's actually fired off, and I can now look at the activity. So depending on what this finds, when it loads, come on Microsoft. There we go. So all items. So this is just where I'm browsing the file structure within Teams. It will unfortunately include some of those, but it will also cover things that you can make very specific as well. something like a particular file or a particular SharePoint library. So you can limit it and filter it down. Other things you can do is obviously filter it based on IP. So you might not care who's accessing it from internally. So if they're in your office, obviously in current times that's unlikely and it's all going to be remote. But what that would mean is that essentially you could almost filter out, you don't mind who accesses it from your office IP range, but actually anything external would be monitored. Those policies are quite straightforward. Here's that one that I created. It monitors any activity, so it's quite easy. Other things that we're going to go through really are just some of the tagging elements, so classification of data. So in here, I've just created an example one, but here's where you can apply particular policies to labels. It's quite straightforward. All you're going to do is basically search for particular criteria and apply it. With the invention of GDPR over the top of the Data Protection Act, obviously a lot of things got a lot more stricter. And in that, we've now been able to apply this tagging element to all file data within Office 365, potentially email messages with particular content included. And it just allows you to have a much more transparent view of who's doing what with your data. You know, some of the inbuilt policies that are here will allow you to identify credit card numbers being passed around your environment via text, chat, or email, for example. And on that, you can then either allow those activities, you can block them, or you can just alert on them. So there's a number of things you can do to control where that data is being used. And again, you don't have to include all of these labels for alerting. You may just actually want to categorize your data so that you can search for it in a different way. So what I'm now going to do, and obviously, you know, back on the subject of GDPR for a minute, data subject requests, so SARs, subject access requests, we've all had to get them at some point. Lots of our clients have had them for various reasons. And all I'm going to do is just quickly show you around how that would be done. So I've got an example here. All you would do is create a new request, just a new case there. And in this, I'm just going to open this one. So this is about my demo user. And all I want to do is look across my whole Office 365 tenant. So that's not just Teams, it's SharePoint, it's OneDrive, it's email, it's everything. All right. And we can see the search there. If I just open that, we can see it includes everything here around conversations, voice, Skype, etc. And it's actually found information for me. And you can see how much. And this is how much it's searched. So if I now go and look, I now have the export, and this is the element of information that you would then potentially share with your subject access requester. So in the event that you do have one of these, it's quite straightforward if you're in an Office 365 tenant. Subject access requests prior to this were quite painful because obviously you have to search in every possible location, physical and digital being all of your potential CRM databases or your personnel databases, etc. So it does make life a lot easier, but obviously part of that needs a strategy to put your data in there in the first place. All right. Okay, at this point, I'm going to wrap up on this area, and I think we're going to now go to Q&A. So Matt, shall I pass it over to you?
Absolutely. All right, so I'll just start really at the top of the list and we'll start working down. First question we had was, does this automatically save documents to SharePoint? So yes, it does. That where we show that library, and actually, Mike, I'm just going to put my screen up just to illustrate a bit more easily. So if I just pop back to that Teams that we had before, this data that's within any of these folders is actually all in SharePoint. All that Teams does is aggregate all the different information into a single place. So this data is in SharePoint, the posts are kept within Teams, and although it's in the same interface, it's all in the same place. Hopefully that answers that one. If we move on then to the second question about does the calendar sync with the output one? If I actually pop open it on my screen, you can see that there's lots of different gaps and things, and this is a demo account, so it's really basic. But again, just as Teams with the SharePoint, just a window into exactly the same. My calendar in Exchange Online, that sits in Office 365 is exactly the same calendar. It's not even sitting, it's another view of the same data. If anyone feels that I do need to add anything more to these questions, then do just pop something into the Q&A. Regarding Steve's question, so around assume that multiple access collaborating on a document only works in the online version of the application. It actually works in both. It works in very slightly different ways and it appears very slightly differently to you, but the functionality is there. If I was to open up a document, so if I go to the example one we were using, and
Do you want me to drop it as well?
Wait for this to load. It's not an IT dev without something pausing on loading. And then open it in Word. And actually, you'd still be able to see the user. They'd just be listed up in this top left-hand corner as someone who's actually working in the document. Same functionality, same live updates as you would get there. As you can see, Mike's just dropped in and he's represented down here in red, typing away. Let's just close that for you. So we've had a question around using zip files, where you put a .zip file into a Teams library and you can access data and try and access it. You are correct, they don't natively open within this interface. The best advice we've got is to export the data as you import it, because there isn't really any advantage of keeping data within zip files within the Teams repository. It just makes it harder to access. There is the ability to, and it's a bit more of an advanced topic, so we didn't cover it in this webinar, to synchronize this and actually provide a view of this data into the standard Windows File Explorer, and it would pop up effectively where OneDrive syncs and in other things, and that would allow you to open zip files. But it's not something that you have to implement for everybody, and the best advice really is to export it out as a zip file as you import it into Teams. Right. See, there are quite a few questions coming in, so I'm gradually just working my way down. When I'm using Teams, when I start a file, it opens within Teams. The next time I open it, it opens in my browser, and there's no option to open it within Teams. Any idea why? I'm afraid with this particular question, Nigel, I'm just going to have to come back to it. If we can just arrange something offline, we'll sort of have a screen share or something. Have a look at that. Brainstorming opportunity in Teams, so tools to encourage participation. So yes, there is a whiteboard, which effectively is a very basic thing to try and get people working together. Unfortunately, I have an example built into my Teams that I can show you because it would require starting a new call. There is plenty of information which we can share around after, and if there's something specific, maybe we'll pick it up as a separate session, and then we really can demonstrate it for you.
Okay, we've got
had a
one
request
there for...
about what the actual SAR report looks like. What we'll do is after this call, we'll include that in the Q&A that we'll send out, and a link to the video and other things that I know Mark is going to pick up. Apparently, I've just missed a question. Apologies for that.
It's all right. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at some of the others. So yeah, so we've just done Lauren's question about the SAR, so we'll cover that. We'll give you a download example. The question of, is it a format that you can redact and send? Not so easy, because that's actually part of what they're trying to avoid, that the data is untouched or unedited. So there is a question of how you store your data in the first place. But we can give you some examples on that. Okay. Keith has asked in chat, if I'm away from the office for a time and logged out with out of office on, does this mean I don't see the chat that happens in my absence? Seems to be the case, and is there a way to fix this to catch up? If it is a direct, either way, a direct chat or a team chat, you should still see it because it should still be in the thread. Matt, have you seen any sign of that before?
No, exactly. You should be able to just see the thread, see any chat messages that came in, no matter really how long you're away. You might turn up with quite a few in the chat window with the notifications about things you haven't seen. but it should all be there for you to read back through both the history on a team and individual messages.
Yeah, I mean, it has the unread option, which is obviously the bold text to say you haven't read it yet, and you'll see obviously the red circle against chat or activity to say you've got things to look at. So that shouldn't be the case. But yeah, we can talk to you and see if there's something we can look at with that for you. Bit of a strange one, not seen that before myself. Okay, how can I search for items when I don't know which channel they are in, or if in posts or wiki? Well, I'll give that one to you, Matt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So really, this search bar at the top searches for everything. So within that, you can actually list out a document name. So I could go for the critical if I could type, and it pull up names. If I hit search, it will search for files, it will search for people, and it will search for messages. Always a good idea not to search for the document that you deleted as part of this work, but part of this demonstration. But that will allow you to search for everything that you have access to within Teams.
Okay. All right, next one is really interested in the Outlook sync, but I'm afraid it's breaking up. So could we please pop in the chat? Okay. Do you want to just cover off Outlook sync again very quickly, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. So this calendar here, apologies, it was breaking up. This calendar here is actually not a synchronized of your Exchange and your Outlook calendar. It's actually a different view into the same data. All it does is it logs into your Outlook calendar and just pulls that information to you. It doesn't need to synchronize data between Teams back again. So any updates, as soon as they happen in your calendar here, happen in your Outlook calendar and vice versa.
Good. Okay. All right. So next question is Roy. So what is the more advanced version of Teams you are using for this webinar, as theirs doesn't have moderated questions, etc.? Okay. So in my section where I was just showing you about live meeting, and this is what we're using now, it's not a scheduled meeting. This is a live event. So this is the element that I said about where we can host up to 20,000 attendees. Within that, we have the option when we create the live event to turn on Q&A, and within Q&A you can see obviously where you can ask a question. We have moderators sitting behind the scenes. So essentially what it does is we have a producer, a presenter, and then the attendees. So the producer is in the background looking at the questions, and actually Matt and I are also producers, so we're on a second machine looking at this as we speak, and any questions asked allows us to check them. Obviously we don't want people dropping in there unacceptable language, etc. So we can manage that before we actually publish the questions. But what it means is we can actually moderate everything we need to do. Similarly, we can see if there's a vote process, you can see are doing the thumbs up, etc. on it. So we can do that. And also within the Q&A element, we can also reply privately to the question. So if it was something particularly specific, we can keep it outside of the webinar itself. All right.
If I take the last call really about only 4 people being able to see on any Teams call, that is actually a restriction within the platform at the moment. However, Microsoft have acknowledged that it's a problem. There is a patch coming in May, is scheduled for release in May, that should up that limit of 4 to 9 people, and they say that they're going to then increase it further from there.
Right, okay. I think that's all we'll do for questions for now, but what we will do is we'll capture all of these, we'll document them, and we'll document the answers again and make that available to all the attendees. So I hope that was good for everyone. I'm now going to pass back to Mark.
Great, thanks Mike, and thanks Matthew for the presentations. It's never easy trying to present a very technical product or service in a very brief time in a live environment, but you both did really, really well. Thank you for that. We appreciate this has been somewhat of a whistle-stop tour of Teams, along with some of the key features. As I'm sure you'll agree, there's a lot of technology and functionality here. At ITRM, we really are perfectly positioned for you to use our expertise to explore the benefits of Teams and to explore the potential. We'd be happy to discuss this in more detail with you on a one-to-one basis. Really hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. If you're an existing client and would like to know more, please contact your account manager. For everyone else, our contact details are on this slide. Please feel free to get in contact with any questions or to arrange a date and a time to discuss the power of Teams in more detail. We have a lot of information and content available on our website and our social media channels. We'll be publishing more content soon. Please connect with us on your preferred social media channel to ensure that you're kept updated. Finally, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to speak with you soon.